And welcome everybody within the chamber and those joining us on the Biddulph Town Council YouTube channel to this month's Planning Committee, Tuesday the 16th of July 2024. Before the meeting starts, I need to read the preamble here, which says this meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the Biddulph Town Council YouTube page. The aim is that decision making should be transparent and in the public domain, which will involve more of our community in local democracy. By being in this council chamber, you are consented to be being recorded and for your image to be added to YouTube. The images and sound may be used for training purposes. Any views expressed are the speaker's own and do not necessarily reflect the view of Biddulph Town Council. Please review guidance on recording and public meetings policy if you need more information. Thank you. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Chief Officer, first item, apologies. Do you have any apologies?
We do. Councillor Eardley, Councillor Hawley and Councillor Rogers is Councillor Hawley's substitute, Councillor Salt and Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Right. Okay, declarations of interest. Do we have any disclosable pecuniary interests and dispensations? That would be a no. Any other interests to be declared?
Yeah.
Councillor Jones?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. SMD 2024-0236 Bailey's Hill Farm. I know the applicant quite well.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. And I do need to declare an interest in that I have been approached and spoken to the developer for SMD 2024-0248, the former Forge Works development on Congleton Road. In the instance of that, I will present information, but I will abstain from the vote. Thank you. Okay, right, moving on. So I have minutes to approve the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on Tuesday, the 18th of June. I can move those minutes. So do you have a seconder for that? So much. Thank you, Councillor Jones. Right. Do we need to go through the details they have been received at Town Council, or are we happy to accept them as received at Town Council? Right. Thank you. Can we have a quick vote on that, please? Show of hands. Thank you very much. And that's unanimous. Do I need to sign these now?
Please.
Talk amongst yourselves while I just sign these off. Thank you. Not mine. Thank you, Chief Officer. Would you like? I'm losing track. I'm losing track of what day of the week it is now. It's not even the day of the month. Right. Okay. Right. So, item 22, standing agenda item to consider any proposed sites for local listing. Do we have any site nominated for local listing, Chief Officer?
Anyone from me?
Okay. Does anyone else have anything? Any proposed sites for local listing? That's a no from the floor. Okay. Right. So, moving on to new planning applications. You should all have been sent a summary I prepared based on both the Neighbourhood Plan policy documents and the general planning guidelines. So, starting with application SMD 2024-0285, Highcroft Woodhouse Lane, Biddulph, porch extension and replacement bay window. Right, this is a two-story side extension to provide utility room and a office on the ground floor with one additional bedroom on the first floor. The existing materials are brick walls with a pebble dash render, roof of clay. No, I'm on the wrong one here. I apologise. One side of the page. I'll start again. It was a big porch. I do apologise. My age. Please forgive me. This is an application for a porch extension with replacement bay window. It has had no pre-application advice. It's to replace a curved bay window with a larger square bay window, the addition of an open porch to the frontage, which is on the drawing slightly ahead of the existing building line of the bay window. It is traditional red brick walls, which will be fully rendered off-white. So the existing materials are red brick with felt shingles to the walls, roof is tiles, windows are white UPVC, a door is UPVC. The proposal is that the walls will be brick rendered with cedar roof boarding up to the eaves. The roof tiles will match the existing. The windows will be grey, white stroke grey UPVC, and the doors will be composite. There's no change to highways impact. There's no impact on trees or hedges or anything else like that. There was no specific design statement put in, but the site is quite visible from the highway and the footpath. There was no supporting statement. Not in the green belt. It doesn't have BNG applicable because it's a household application, and the only potential neighbourhood plan policy that impacts this is a DES 1 on design. The recommendation from here, from myself, would be to approve it with conditions, or recommend. We don't obviously approve, but to recommend approval with conditions. The location abuts the green belt on the edge of Biddulphmore Village. It's rendering existing traditional red brick, which will change the character of the building. I'm sure people may have a comment to make on that. However, in mitigation for that, the adjacent property is already rendered, but that appears to be white rather than off-white. Possible conditions might be that the porch and the replacement bay window do not extend beyond the existing curvature of the existing bay window. That defines the building line, I believe. And that the windows perhaps should match the existing rather than being grey and white mix. Possibly suggest the render might also match the adjacent property. Any comments from the floor?
I can't see anything wrong with it, Chair. Really.
Okay, so are we happy to recommend approval, and do we feel that we should put the condition on in terms of the porch projecting beyond the existing building line?
If I may, Chair, I think it brings the elevation, it makes it look more attractive. I wouldn't put any conditions. I'd happily propose NAC.
Okay, so in that case, we propose approval without conditions. Recommending approval, obviously we don't approve, but
Just depend on neighbours' concerns, really. Neighbours' concerns, that's the only thing.
there were no supporting statements from either neighbours, and there were no objections from neighbours. So happy to say, okay, approved subject to no valid neighbours' concerns.
Yeah.
Okay, can I have a? Are you proposing that, John? And I'll second.
Proposing no adverse comments. I'm not proposing approval or rejection. I'm proposing.
Okay, right.
No adverse comments.
In that case, my original recommendation would be proposal for approval. Can I have a seconder for that? Thank you. Can we have a vote on recommending it be approved, subject to any valid neighbours planning concern? Okay, right. Now we will move on to SMD 2024-0287 201 Park Lane, Knipersley. This is a proposed two-storey side extension. It's a two-storey side extension to provide utility room and house on the ground floor and additional bedroom on the first floor. The materials, existing materials are the walls are brick with pebble dash render above to the upper floor. The roof's clay tiles. The proposal is that the walls would be brick with render to match. And the roof tiles to match. There's no existing, no deals with existing proposed window treatment. So we don't know what they're going to do on that, but I would suggest we would want those to match. It's a two-storey extension to a semi-detached property on Park Lane. It's quite a large extension. Depending upon how you look at what you're looking at on the plans, it might actually represent about 50% of the existing floor area being over the two floors. It's the last but one property before the open farmland on the bridge, the farmland bridge to Rock End going up Park Lane. The walls and roof to match existing brick on the ground floor and rendered on the first floor, which would keep it in keeping. No impact on any of the trees, hedges, or access to the highways or parking. It is in the green belt, which is where my suggestion or recommendation to refuse is coming from, because it represents quite a significant increase to the size of the property. It's only on one side of the semi-detached property, and therefore unbalancing the appearance of the property, possibly detrimental to the green belt, and so inappropriate, as the planning guidelines suggest that all development in the green belt is inappropriate unless it has mitigating circumstances, and I'm not sure that there are. So I think from a planning perspective, we should be thinking about refusing this. I was quite surprised that it was wholly within the green belt and not excluded, but So as I say, purely from a planning regulation perspective, I think planners will deem it to be inappropriate development within the green belt. Any comments from the floor? Councillor Jackson.
Just one, how did the properties get built in the first place if they were in the green belt?
I think you'll find that they look as if they're 1930s properties,
Or the green
just
belt?
before the green belt existed.
The ribbon development, aren't they?
Pardon?
Ribbon development.
Yes, well, I say it's the development working its way up Park Lane towards Biddlesmore Village. And it's effectively the downhill semi of the semi block before you get to the open farmland section. Do you want to have if we zoom out on the planning map a little bit, zoom out. The other way, please. You can see that essentially it's adjacent to the farmland and it's that part of that block there. The property itself appears to have a large plot of land behind it. I was initially concerned that they were building over the driveway, but the drive is adjacent to it. It has all the land behind as well. Councillor James.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying about the green belt, but surely if a house is built within the green belt, then the house within the curtilage of the house, I didn't think that was still green belt. Otherwise, I mean, I couldn't have built an extension or done anything on my house because I'm in the green belt. Obviously, I'm in a building plot as well, so that's not the green belt, not within the curtilage of my boundary. I'm just saying what I think. I may be well.
Absolutely, yeah, yes, absolutely.
I can't see I can see this being approved at least. I mean, it's a standard type side extension on a standard semi in a row of similar houses.
I say, yes.
Is there a footpath adjacent?
No, I don't believe there is. There's been no comment from any of the ramblers or the footpath, and if it was a footpath adjacent to it, they would have been on the consultees list, and I don't think they are. So it's just simply a case of in light of the recent views from the planning department on terms of any development in the green belt, I think they will probably refuse it, and I think technically it is a significant development which may be deemed inappropriate. If the general consensus here is not to refuse it, this is only a recommendation, then I would suggest that we would want to put conditions on it, such as perhaps restricting it, I'll say basically to remove any permitted development rights, to restrict any further development outside that, and to ensure that the window treatments match and that the design maintains the integrity of the original property and its appearance. Councillor Rogers, and then
putting green belt to one side, I don't think that sees the permitted development exercise.
it's
Size of the development isn't over the size of permitted.
this is well over the size of permitted development, but it may well actually constitute overdevelopment of the property because it represents more than 50% of the original print. They're demolishing, I think at the moment there's a conservatory and a small extension at the back. They're basically building over.
I think it'll go through personally.
I do, actually.
Okay, so the consensus is not to refuse. Do we feel that we should be placing conditions on it in terms of removing?
Subject to it not contravening any. No.
Yeah. Okay. So in that case, to recommend approval subject to not contravening the greenbelt regulations, and how would you feel about restricting permitted development? We have the ability to suggest that. And certainly in terms of trying to maintain the integrity of the design, we have the I think it's almost incumbent upon us as from S1 to take that. Yes,
Can I just say, if it's against the rules, it's against the rules. So we object to it. It's simple as that. I mean, I don't see why we should have to, but if it's against the rules, it's against the rules.
So that was where my view was coming from the original recommendation to refuse, because I think it does contravene the greenbelt regulations. But if the consensus here is that we should not recommend refusal, recommend approval subject to it not contravening, then that's an option that we have.
Yeah, I honestly cannot believe that any house that sits within the green belt cannot have an extension built on it. There must be thousands done every day. I can't believe that's the case. We must be misinterpreting the rules here somewhere.
I think the definition of the rule is that all development in the greenbelt is deemed inappropriate unless there are mitigating circumstances. That's where the greenbelt regulations were written in order to protect this. But I think from what I'm seeing, so Councillor Jackson, are you going to propose to recommend approval subject to non-contravention of the greenbelt regulation?
Green belt, it'll get turned down.
Well, anyway, yeah.
So in that case, we have
In principle, I can't see anything to say otherwise. If it does contravene, then fair enough. Yes, okay, pick it up.
Right. Okay. So a proposal for recommending approval subject to it not contravening the greenbelt regulations. Are you happy to have the condition put on it for restricting permitted development?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see whether the district, how much weight the district council now puts behind those sort of.
Yes, because
really interesting.
we have, in the absence of a district council meeting, we haven't had the opportunity to question the portfolio holder on the planning department's apparent disregard. I was trying to be slightly diplomatic. I could say their flagrant disregard of our neighbourhood plan, but perhaps to not give it the consideration they should. Are we happy to take that as a seconder for that?
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Of show of hands. Okay, so that's approval subject to not contravening the greenbelt regulations. Condition of restricting. Brilliant. Thank you. Right. There's a number of complex ones this month, which is quite fun. Okay, moving on to SMD 2024-0268, the workshop on Harlech Drive. Right.
Can I just say?
Yeah.
There are two. Are these identical?
No. One is this confused me initially. The first is a planning application. The second is a application for what is it? It's actually a listed building consent. Because it is a listed building, they've put in both a planning application and an application for listed building consent. Because I got all the way through the first one thinking, we can't do this. It has to go to a listed building consent to find that the next one was in fact the listed building consent.
Thank you for
The above.
Thank you for clarifying that, 'cause it confused me.
But yeah, the wording is identical in both.
Absolutely.
And they're both SMD 20 this year with just different numbers.
Yes. One is when you look at the actual paperwork on the system, one is for a planning application and one is for listed building consent, which they have to do, I believe, because it's a listed building. Right. So.
Are you considering both of these together?
Yes, I was going to suggest we deal with both of these together because essentially, as Councillor Jones says, the applications are nearly identical in every word. So.
Exactly identical.
Right. Now, brilliant. Thank you. This is exactly the one that I want. Right. So this is a development for internal alterations and the addition of a 17-metre squared extension to a grade 2 listed dwelling, demolition of an unlisted outhouse and construction of a garden home office. This is the planning application and the second is the listed building planning consent, which is 269. There was no pre-application advice. Summary of the proposals, it's an existing grade 2 listed dwelling. The internal alterations are to open up the ground floor with a small lightweight partition to improve kitchen utility usability, lightweight partitions on the first floor, introduction of 2 roof lights and replacement of 2 roof lights to improve natural daylight on the first floor. And the extension is the erection of a 17-metre squared, referred to as GIA extension to provide additional living space and a second bedroom. The unlisted outhouse, which is at the end of the property's garden, is to be demolished, retaining the bricks and roof tiles for the and reconstructed using these materials to form a garden home office. They're also applying to adjust the fence line to move some garden area from the adjacent cottage, which the applicants own and live in at present, to the new property. The existing materials are coursed stone. The roof is Staffordshire blue tiles, and the windows are single glazed timber. That's not timer, that should be timber. The roof lights are conservation steel roof lights, and the doors are timber casement door. Proposal is that the walls of the new extension will be a cavity construction with coursed stone facings to match the existing stone of the building. The roof tiles will match. The windows will be double glazed casement windows and roof lights will be replaced with PPC coated aluminium colour to match the existing. There's also the addition of a polyester coated aluminium glazed link between the extension and the main building. This will be the thing that I think may be at issue. It's basically the conversion to enlarge the property to allow the owners of Chapel Cottage, the adjacent property, to downsize to what was their parents' house, leaving Chapel House to their children, the next generation. The part of the justification statement is about the tradition of downsizing and passing on the property to the next generation. The roof lights are specifically there to improve light and to improve the thermal efficiency because the existing units are old and thermally inefficient, and the internal changes are to improve the usability. The main argument of the supporting statement, there's quite a large document, is about justifying the increase of 52% of the volume of the floor area, which would be outside the, I think, planning regulations, as it brings the building in line with the current space requirements for a modern 2-bedroomed property. I don't think it's in the green belt. Yes, it's not in. I don't think it's in the green belt, and there's no BNG. I didn't mark that. I apologise. And again, the only neighbourhood plan policy that I think comes into bearing on this is design. The additional information is that that there are 2 footpaths adjacent to this, and the Ramblers and the Footpath Association have both required that they remain open. It's a very large new extension. It will dominate the views of the property from the rear, which is Denby Close, which abuts the rear of the former stable block from Knipersley Hall, is what this is. And in my opinion, it's a striking design, but it might be considered out of character with the listed building, with the large glazed area link between the main building and the extension. And my recommendation on this at this moment in time is that I don't think we have the expertise to judge this. We should send it forward with no comments from this and leave it to refer it to the planning officers to make the decision on this and the listed buildings. I think I had Councillor Rogers and then Councillor Lawton, and then I'll come back Councillor Rogers.
What I haven't heard on this, I know the area fairly well, is where they're going to park. It's chaos around there already. Is there any parking provisions put into it?
I think it's only the existing parking provision on the far side, on the what is the frontage of the building. The extension is on the back. Can we pull up the Google Maps, a chance? Because what I'd like to do, if we have Google Maps of the. While you're doing that, I'll have another biscuit. Go on to the
archway on the left.
layers version as well, so we can actually see them. The topography. I think that's it. Yes, it's that block there. There we go. We zoom in on there. Okay, and then so it's that block that's there, that one there. Okay. So it's going on the back, the middle of that, effectively pointing towards where just this side of where the white van is parked. Jody, can you just on the street view place it where that little white van is, please, behind the property?
This little white van?
Yeah, yeah, little man, and then just put him there.
You can see the back.
Okay, right. So that's basically, it's going on the back of this, other way, please. It's going on the back of this building. So essentially it's going to project out from just the other side of where that hedge line is. To the
hedge, isn't it, Jim?
It's just the other side of the hedge, yes. Yeah, it's there. It's basically there.
It'll look awful.
That is my concern, is that from particularly from the properties on this side, it's going to be very dominant as a 2-story extension coming out with a windows only on the ground floor. So it'll be a large block of stone or stone facing above it. But as I say, I think I quite like the design, but I'm not sure it's in keeping with the property. I don't believe we have the expertise to judge this, so I would suggest sending it effectively with no comments from here and recommend and refer it to the planning office for their decision. Comments from the floor. Councillor Lawton.
I'm seeking some information, please, Chair.
It mentions it being a 17 metre square GIA extension. What is GIA?
I think it's basically the ground, the ground internal area, I think. It's basically the floor, the actual internal usable floor space. And they've made great mention of that because I think the proportion of the new extension is greater than the permitted development of no more than 50% for overdevelopment. They are also making point that some of the areas that are counted as floor space aren't usable because they're under eaves and all sorts of things like that. So it's there's an awful lot involved in this. So I think you had a comment as well, and then Councillor Fletcher. Yes.
I'm quite impressed with sort of quirky designs on houses, but does it contribute great to listing?
That's essentially they're asking for a judgment on the listed building consent, and I don't think that we're in a position to judge that.
I was going to say without
Listed building consent.
judge, can't we?
So which is where my comment was coming from.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fletcher.
It just looks to me as though it would completely change the character of the whole building. And surely that's inappropriate.
I agree.
I personally would agree with that, but again, I say I was hedging my bets on this one because I didn't feel qualified to judge it. I've spent a lot of time going through this one trying to understand it, and I'm not sure that I could make the judgment because of the nature of the listed building, and therefore we should refer it to the experts.
Agree.
Okay.
Are we happy to go with my recommendation that we make no comments and effectively refer it to the planning officers to make an informed decision? Okay, so I got a second for that? Well, we could, okay.
We always refer everything to the planning officers to make a decision. That is their job.
This is true.
So
Okay,
it's the listed building issue that you.
I think
It's true we don't have the expertise to comment on listed buildings.
would it be a reflection of the consensus of the meeting that we're concerned about the inappropriateness of the development on a listed building? So we have a concern regarding that, and particularly in the what design is striking, it may not be sympathetic to the existing building.
Yeah.
But that we would refer it to the,
When have no
It's too odd.
yeah, which have no, yes. Pardon? What was that, Councillor?
It's too odd.
I'll be brutally honest with you, Councillor Jones, that was exactly where I got to after nearly an hour struggling through all the paperwork on it.
So how about you're concerned about the listed building development and you need more information from the heritage team?
Yes, it needs to have a proper heritage assessment.
Heritages.
Okay, right,
Lack of knowledge doesn't stop us from commenting on them.
okay, right. So,
Never let that.
Yeah, in all seriousness and joking apart, if we don't have the expertise to make a measured judgment on either way, so for us to recommend approval or not,
yes,
is a waste of time really. So we might as well throw our hands up and say, you know, I paraphrased it before, but exactly what I'm saying is the case. And I think we need to let the planning officers that we go into it in some detail.
okay, so we got some, we have a quick show of hands, we're all happy to accept that as a, right, okay, thank you. Right. And it doesn't get any easier. Moving on to the next one, which is, this is the former Forge Works, Congleton Road, the development by, Key Worker Homes. There's redevelopment of the former Dye Works for residential purposes comprising an erection of 19 dwellings. It's a resubmission of a previous planning application. It's essentially what they're asking for here is a variation on the condition. So it's not in itself a planning application. It's an application to vary various conditions from the original planning application, which were changing the triggers for the approval of the details that they require. So a development can commence without all the conditions having been fully discharged, but that they will be discharged before the final approval. Essentially, so I've declared an interest on this in that councillors Hart, Parks, Yates and myself were contacted by the developer to gauge our view of the situation. Essentially, he's trying to get the development going through. Most of the conditions have already been met. There's a whole list of conditions that have already been discharged, and he's simply asking that those conditions be varied as he's requested. This is part of an ongoing discussion between the developer and the planning department to ensure that this local housing development, which is, we do need housing developments in the town, that they can be met. It does have BNG, biodiversity net gain requirements, and there is an on-site provision. The large area at the back of the site, so effectively where it's I'll go on point. Development will be on this section here, and this will all be reclaimed back to for the biodiversity net gain. So it's actually meeting the best requirement of biodiversity net gain on the site itself. There is a new planning application coming in which moves the houses around from being at the front of the site, which is not feasible because of the contours of the land, to the back of the site, which will actually then insulate better the biodiversity area away from the properties, because they'll effectively provide the barrier to it. My recommendation is for approval, because I think it's something that we need, and it complies with the housing requirements, the design requirements, and it does impact on public realm and car parking. I think what we should do also is recommend that if there's any 106 contribution from this development, that be applied to restricting the speed on Congleton Road to 30 miles an hour, for extending that further towards Congleton. Because I think with the thought of 19 houses with potentially 38 car movements morning and evening, that would be a requirement, but that's beyond us. That's for the next planning application.
Just for me.
Yep.
On the original planning application, did highways actually stipulate anything along those grounds? Because that's the time it should have been done at that point rather than later. And I agree.
I don't believe it was, but I think when the replacement planning application with the new revised plan comes forward, then we need to stipulate that. But at this point in time, I'm recommending that we recommend approval on the basis that it contributes to the housing need of the town and complies with our neighbourhood plan. Right, I'll go around the table if that's all right. Councillor Holdsworth.
Has the area actually been cleared now, and has it been decontaminated?
It's not being decontaminated as such, in that it's being capped to retain the contamination in the ground. Contamination, my understanding, and Councillor Fletcher's a chemist as well, aren't you? I think is that most of the contaminants are non-mobile. They're pigments rather than water-based dyes. I think there are cyano compounds in there as well, or there were in there as well. There's a lot of contamination in that land that really needs to be dealt with, and this development is a means of effectively seeding that land and making it usable rather than being a contaminated eyesore. Okay, right. So
how's that going to work with the footings? Does it below the footings?
There's a document that's this big that tells you about how it's sealing it in and what the mechanisms are, and that's part of the conditions here that have been partially discharged. So they've done a certain amount of it, but they need to approach it through a different mechanism.
Because I would be concerned if we were going on there that there was contamination to the brook. It's right on the edge of it.
Yeah, the site is contaminated. End of story. The water, I don't believe that there is any contamination in the water course at the moment.
No,
and again, that's beyond.
We're going on.
Yeah, right. Councillor Fletcher.
Yeah, this actual application does relate back to a number of earlier applications which have reference to, but I have worked my way through that, and there seems to be a terrible history for this particular plot of land. There have been a number of issues that have been raised regarding building development on this site for more than 15 years. And in an earlier planning application, which was refused based on land contamination issues, Dr. Daniel McCrory, who's the Senior Pollution Officer for the District Council, he was highly involved in a number of years in advising that no activity could take place until all contaminated land had been correctly dealt with. The contaminations he referred to were copper, benzo-A-pyrene, cyanide, chromium, chromium-4, lead and strontium-90. And then in 2014, there was a phase 1 geo-environmental site assessment carried out by E3P. And that was sent to Jane Curley, who's the county planning officer. And this particularly noted the presence of chromium, chromium-4, lead, cyanide, strontium and copper. And no activity has been seen to take place over all these years, and therefore I'm just assuming that these contaminants, they still exist. And then in 2014, there was a further planning application for housing submitted. This application provided a number of house designs and elevations, but no other development details or information. But what it did include was a number of appendices. And these were Appendix 1, all to do with an aerodrome. Appendix 2, all to do with land in Brayton Heath. Appendix 3, all to do with land in Williston, Cheshire. Appendix 4, referencing to Wychavon, Worcestershire District Council. Appendix 5, a summary of contamination issues, but it wouldn't open. Appendix 6, an Environment Agency letter, but that wouldn't open. And Appendix 7, drawing 2031-120A, but that wouldn't open.
Okay, can I just stop there for a second? At the moment, there is actually an approved planning application for this, and what they're applying for here is the variation of conditions, many of which have been discharged and fallen, some of them partially. Now, I think there is one of the conditions regarded the contamination, and that had been partially discharged in terms of work had been done on the site to cap areas of the site. I think the particular area behind the council liaison, remind me, you were involved in some of the discussions on this. The pond at the top, which is in the biodiversity game, that's all been dealt with, hasn't it?
They said verbally that I thought we dealt with, because we specifically raised those points and said those have been dealt with and signed off the satisfaction of the officers. We didn't receive any documentary evidence of that suggestion.
There is, say, in the original, if you look back at the original planning application and some of the conditions that have been discharged on that, there is evidence of that.
Yes.
But that's, I say, so again. So in terms of the application to vary the conditions, we know there's been a lot of issues before. Is there something in that you're unhappy about?
I'm actually saying I'm not convinced that any of what they're saying has been done. We walk 4 or 5 times a week down the footpath that runs adjacent to that plot of land, and then walk along the road in front of it. And over all these years, I haven't seen any activity being taken place on that site at all. So I can't see how the contaminations could have been dealt with, because I know I would have noticed that activity going on.
Okay, so but in terms of the varying the conditions, are you saying that you don't think we should be varying the conditions, that we should basically leave all the conditions that were originally set by the original planning application in place?
We can't really say anything other than that. I mean, we can't tell them district planning that they've made the wrong decision.
No, because they will police the conditions that they've applied to it. Okay. I'll carry on around the table and I'll come back to Councillor Rogers and Councillor Jones. Yes, Councillor.
You went past me, actually.
Councillor Jones, I do apologise. I hadn't seen your hand go up before Councillor.
Carry on, your chair.
Right, thank you.
Well, Councillor Fletcher's answered a lot of what I was thinking about with the conditions. But is there any actually opposition to it ongoing?
As far as there are there were no letters of objection.
Yeah.
Well, right, okay.
They've uploaded one that's wrong. It's for site in Cheadle, and there's one other objection that's gone on.
What relevance was the aerodrome? Because I saw that as well.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
About how they've.
It's an aerodrome in a completely different
Is it
area of the
they have
country.
dealt with contaminated land in the past?
I have a feeling that's likely to be the case, but to be honest, it's.
You don't know.
No.
Do you want me to read?
There are new
Yeah,
check.
if you could you read the objection, please?
Yeah, the application provides only minimal detail to understand what works and engagement have taken place, and such meaningful understanding of the need for the variations is not possible within the consultation document. To this end, the application is incomplete due to the lack of information and risks the decision being taken that cannot fully consider the implications of the amendment to conditions. The planning authority to challenge is due to maladministration. The developer must provide much more detailed information to support such widespread proposed amendments to what would be a sizable development in this location with impacts on residents, neighbours and highway users.
Was that from?
That's, well, I guess it's a resident. It's a comment received on the public access.
Okay, right.
Okay.
So, anything more, councillor Uptrough? Yes. Sorry,
1st of July.
Right. Do you have your?
Yes.
Yes.
I think the history of this site goes way back. And, you know, most of us probably remember the blue dye. And the number of planning I remember a cold wharf was one of the applications there many years ago as well. I think it's a brownfield site.
It's actually it's still actually wholly within the green belt, although it is clearly a contaminated industrial site. So,
A brown or blue.
Bluefield, I think, would be fields in this case.
Whatever. So I think there's a lot going for it to get this development through. I take on board all of the issues about the contaminated land, but we're here really, we've got to sort of take some advice from the experts here that says it's all okay, it's going to be okay. I wouldn't mind having a lettuce off that land, but a carrot, not so sure, you know. I mean, I don't know. I really don't know.
Horticultural point of view, you're probably more danger from broccoli from the site.
All I'm saying is, I think hopefully people living there will suffer absolutely no side effects or issues whatsoever. But we've got to rely on the experts who say that piece of land is now safe to live on and to grow stuff on as well, I should imagine.
And then I'll come back the other way around. Councillor Jones, I apologise for getting you the
Chair, we're talking this to death here. It seems to me this what we've got in front of us is variation of these conditions 4, 5, 14, 16, 19 and 31. Are any of those pertaining to the contamination? That's the first question. And if they're not, then why are we talking about contamination other than, I will say, I personally have concerns. How do you cap off that sort of ground contamination? You know, how far down do you go? You know, the water gets in, it runs out, where does it go? You know, but I'm not an expert, you're the chemist, I mean, you seem.
I'm a dye chemist, but yeah.
Well, you know, that's the part, it's just my personal opinion, but as I say, as regards to this application, what do we know, what are those conditions? And that's what we should be looking at tonight.
Be somewhere around.
There's no more detail on that. We'd have to go back to the original planning application. But
Like how long ago was it? 60 miles?
But essentially, I think that they're not saying they don't want to comply with the conditions. They just want to change the trigger point so they can start work and continue to meet those conditions. I think the way in which the conditions were originally written was such that you have to do this work, but you can't start the work until you've done the work. Yeah.
I haven't got enough information to make a decision one way or the other.
Okay, in that case, Councillor Rogers, I think you had a comment.
Just very briefly, just on contamination, as you remember, and a lot of us remember, everything used to be blue in that area, which has slowly disappeared. And I was told as you were saying, 10, 15 years ago, there's samples taken. Recently, I've been told been more ground samples taken, and they are now at a controllable level. That's why the planning application has gone through, because it's naturally disappeared over all these years. That's what I believe it to be.
Okay, right. So, Councillor Yates, did you want to come in on this?
Yes,
You'll be the last person on this. So I think everyone actually.
yes, I do generally understand the concerns about heavy metal contamination. We had a similar site in the Staffordshire Moorlands at Joshua Wardle Works down at Leakbrook, and there was a lot of consideration there, and there was a lot of issues after building work started. If my memory's right, I'm looking at the long-standing Staffordshire Moorlands councillor over there just to give me some kind of acknowledgement on that. And I think extra remedial work and quite a few tons of soil were removed and a lot more tests were done. There's also been a well-documented issue going back probably a couple of decades now about cadmium contamination at the building site after the buildings had been done in Bristol, because that was a big lead mining area with the particular ground under there. I'm just wondering whether it's due diligence from the council's point of view to actually write a letter to the environmental health team at Staffordshire Moorlands, just asking them for their assurance that work has been done for it, just to reaffirm that the work has been done to a satisfactory standard, and the test results prove that it's ready to go ahead, which supports us accepting the variation in the conditions. I think that's a reasonable thing for them to sort of double check and just make sure that the I's have been dotted and the T's have been crossed, because of legacy issues which have been found before in the past. I do accept that over time these things would leach out and dilute, but you are talking very heavy metals with chromium especially.
So in terms of moving this on, are we suggesting that we effectively pass on it and say that we can't judge on this, but we're happy to make no adverse comments, Councillor Jones, some assurances from the environmental department that all the contamination issues have been satisfactorily addressed. Councillor Fletcher, would you be happy with that?
I'd be happy with that.
Okay, so
I think, Chair, unless we know what these numbers mean, what they pertain to, we can't decide on it.
Yeah.
Can we?
okay, so
Let's just come back to the idea of the cap. How do you cap it off? Dig it out, surely.
no, not necessarily.
Something over the top of it.
Some contaminants will not be mobile. Therefore, if you seal them in,
Well, yeah,
they don't go.
they've got to be mobile. If water flows in and flows through, it's going to take stuff through with it, isn't it?
Some aren't. Okay.
Okay, well, as I say, you're the chemist, not me, so I'll shut up.
If they're in clay soil, the clay will actually bind to certain minerals. Charged in all.
Well, unless we know what those numbers are,
Okay.
we
so
can't make a call either way.
if we say I'm not going to vote on this, so because I've been involved with the developer, so the proposal would be that we have no adverse comments subject to assurances from the environmental department of Staffordshire Moorlands that all the contamination issues have been satisfactorily addressed. Circumvent any of those.
Chair, with respect, we say we haven't got enough information to make a decision.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
Yeah, I wouldn't say no adverse comment.
Yeah.
I'd say that
Oh,
comment we make is to just,
Can we have it? Yeah.
can we have an assurance
Okay.
that all current tests are meet the standards?
Okay.
We are
Would any of us
rejecting it.
buy a property on there?
no,
No.
people, we wouldn't.
That's a purely emotive statement, but yeah. So Councillor Yates, you're on this committee, therefore you're proposing that we effectively note that our comment, the only comment we make is that we would seek assurances
Yes,
in order to accept or to
I would
Approve.
propose that our comment is neutral with regard to approval or rejection. But we ask for assurances that the appropriate tests and samples have been done to ensure that the ground is fit for building in compliance with these conditions, which is fair to assume. It's signing off the fact that the land has been cleaned up, because that was.
Thank you, Councillor Yates. I'm conscious that we've only got 10 minutes
I
left.
agree with that.
You're happy to,
Thank you.
that's why you Councillor Fletcher can have a show of hands on that proposal? Okay, I'm obviously abstaining because of discussions with the developer, right? Okay, moving on to Bailey Hill Farm. Councillor Jones, you declared an interest in this.
One vote on it.
Okay, this is for a detached garage on at Bailey's Hill Farm at Over the Hill, Biddulph Moor. The erection of a detached concrete garage clad with timber panels on the site of what appears to be a chicken roost on the original plans. It's a similar footprint to the chicken roost, but rotated through 90 degrees, completely within the compound of the existing buildings. The walls are concrete panels with timber cladding. The roof is clay tiles to match the houses. Doors will be steel sectional and access door in anthracite grey. No design statement, but the cladding is clearly an attempt to blend, the wood cladding is clearly an attempt to blend this into the rural location. It is in the green belt. There is no BNG applicable. There's no pre-application advice. In fact, none of the neighbourhood plan policies actually apply to this. It's a single garage built with an existing compound, basically dropped in the middle. I would recommend approval, conditions that it doesn't contravene the green belt regulations. Any comments on that? Okay, can I have a seconder for that as a proposal? Thank you, councillor Yates. Can we have a show of hands, please? Thank you. That was a nice, simple one. Thank goodness. Right. Final one is number 3, Hazel Grove, Biddulph Moor. A lot in Biddulph Moor at the moment. Proposed extension and alteration to provide additional accommodation. There was no pre-application advice. I haven't ticked the box there. It's not in the green belt. It doesn't have BNG applicable. Unfortunately, I'm unable to access the proposed plans when I looked at it, but is this how wonderful? So my comment on what I could read was that it's existing as beige brickwork with hanging tiles, roof are Ludlow tiles, windows are brown timber and the doors are timber. Proposal is brickwork to match and rent to the gable and the dormer. Roof of the tiles to match, doors and windows, grey UPVC, and they're going to replace the existing timber windows to match the grey UPVC. No changes to the boundary, trees, hedges, no impact on parking or highways. It's a bungalow set between two higher properties, as you can see on the diagram here. The only potential neighbourhood plan policy again would be design. Is it suitable design? Is it suitable design? The dormers are off the back, so they won't be visible from the immediate road. I couldn't comment at the time because I couldn't see the suitability of the design. So I wasn't prepared to make a comment because I couldn't actually see what was going to be built. So now we can see what's going to be built. Anyone have any comments? Are we happy to recommend approval? Yes, Cash. Yes.
7 bedrooms.
7
bedrooms. Am I looking at the right one?
Yeah.
Can I ask where they're going to park all the cars?
Oh, there's an interesting thought.
We've got 3 parking spaces.
They've got 3 parking spaces. Yeah. That's a very good point. I don't think there was a highway comment on here, was there? So I think that's a legitimate concern. Thank you.
I couldn't open this one.
Yeah, yes, it was right. Oh, thank you. So essentially they are significantly increasing the size of the property, aren't they? Whoa, yes.
So development.
I think, yeah, yes. I think, yeah, in the context of that, now I can see the plans. Yes.
That's a 7-bedroom house in that estate position is completely out of context with everything else which is there. And it's one thing to say, yes, there's room for 3 cars, but knowing
7 bedrooms, I think,
knowing
3 cars.
4-bedroom houses which have got will come to a time where they have 4 cars.
Okay, I think I just said, yes. Is this something that's going to be happening in the future that isn't a dwelling for normal? Get me?
Yeah.
So it's some, as Val bought it with a proposal to.
I pick up on that. What I'll do is I'll cut it here and say I think from what the general consensus is, and I'm now looking at the plans, we should recommend refusal on the grounds it's overdevelopment, inappropriate, and there isn't sufficient parking for the rooms that are being applied. Are we all happy with that? Seconded from over there. Can I have a show of hands? Right. That was simple, wasn't it? Right, moving on quickly. Have we received any supplementaries? No, lovely, no supplementaries. Decisions received. Essentially, we have Right, we have a disagreement between ourselves and district on Cloud Park Farm, Dial Lane, Congleton, where we recommended approval, and the planning permission was refused on the grounds that it does not represent good design, does not respect the original dwelling scale and size, linear form, character and proportions. As a farm cottage converted Shippen, that should be Shippen with an O, I think, provided the historic 19th century farmstead. The district also refused one that I think we recommended refusal, so they agree with us on that one. I think all the rest are essentially agreeing with what we said. So moving on to item 26, appeals, Park Lane. You should have been circulated with our original decision, which was we were recommending approval. The plot was sufficient size to accommodate the dwelling. The document from the district, from the Moorlands, who were refusing planning permission on the grounds on which they were refusing planning permission, and an illustration of the proposed site, which is essentially building a large, I think 3 or 4 bedroom house on the back garden of 51A. So does anyone have, on the light of the information you've seen, does anyone have any additional comments that they wish us to make to district council in light of the appeal? On the basis that we were originally saying, does anyone think we should make a different decision in the light of what was made in 2023? I see nothing from the floor. So that's how we have no additional comments to make. Okay, we're all happy with that?
Yeah.
Right, thank you. I therefore declare this, is that thing up the end, isn't it?
Okay.
I declare this meeting closed at 6:28.
Roger.